Imagine walking along an ancient road, not of asphalt or concrete, but of earth and stone, where every carefully placed rock tells a story, a silent language etched into the landscape itself. Long before texts or tablets, before ink touched parchment, our ancestors mastered a form of communication so elegant and enduring that it wove entire civilizations together. They didn't need written words to share vital knowledge. Instead, they let the roads speak. Through intricate patterns formed from stone, they conveyed directions, warnings, offerings, and dreams across deserts, mountains, and forests. This was a world where trade routes hummed with meaning, where a simple arrangement of rocks could guide a caravan to water, signal the proximity of danger, or invite a stranger into community. It was a system built not on alphabets, but on intuition, observation, and a shared understanding of the land, a forgotten art that turned pathways into living libraries. What if I told you that some of history's most vital communication happened without a single written word, that for centuries, cultures separated by language and distance could trade, travel, and thrive using nothing more than patterns in stone? This isn't just a curiosity, it's a testament to human ingenuity, to our deep-seated need to connect, collaborate, and leave our mark on the world. In an age where we're surrounded by digital chatter and instant messaging, there's something profoundly moving about these ancient, tactile messages. They remind us that communication is, at its heart, about understanding not just words but symbols, gestures, and the unspoken bonds that tie us together. These stone patterns were more than navigation aids. They were maps of meaning, echoing with the voices of those who came before us. In this video, we're setting out on a journey to uncover how these silent messengers shaped the course of history. We'll traverse the vast Inca road system, walk the sands of the Silk Road, and explore how symbols carved in stone helped build networks of trust and trade spanning continents. We'll see why this method was often more effective than early writing, how it transcended language barriers, resisted the ravages of time, and connected people in ways words sometimes could not. And perhaps most importantly, we'll discover what these ancient practices can teach us about resilience, creativity, and the universal human desire to be understood. So come with us, let's step into the footsteps of ancient traders, unravel the mysteries hidden in plain sight, and listen closely as the stones begin to speak. Picture the earliest days of human civilization, a time when vast, untamed landscapes separated small communities. In these isolated pockets, survival depended on what could be hunted, grown, or gathered locally. But certain things vital, precious, or simply desired were not available everywhere. This fundamental scarcity sparked a revolution in human interaction, the birth of trade corridors. These were not roads as we know them today, but rather well-worn paths forged by countless feet, hooves, and cartwheels over generations. They snaked through mountain passes, followed the courses of life-giving rivers, and stretched across daunting deserts. These pathways became the arteries of the ancient world, pumping not blood, but something equally vital: resources, innovation, and culture. The driving force behind these sprawling networks was often a simple, profound need. A coastal community might have an abundance of shells and dried fish, but they craved the obsidian from volcanic highlands to make sharper tools. An inland settlement rich in salt, a mineral essential for preserving food, would seek out spices or rare dyes from faraway lands. And the allure of precious metals like gold and copper for ornamentation and early currency created demand that could motivate journeys of unbelievable length and danger. This wasn't merely about luxury, it was about necessity, status, and technological advancement. The trade of these goods didn't just fill material needs, it built interdependencies between cultures, fostering the first inklings of a globalized economy, however slow and perilous it may have been. As these exchanges grew more frequent and complex, a new challenge emerged. How did a trader from one region, speaking a language utterly foreign to his counterparts, communicate vital information along the route? How did you warn the next caravan of a washed-out bridge, or direct them to a fresh water source, or indicate that a certain valley was ripe for trading its abundant harvest? Written language, where it existed, was often the domain of scribes and priests, not the common merchant. And with a multitude of languages and scripts along a single trade route, a written message could be completely useless to its intended recipient. This communication barrier demanded an innovative, universal solution. The answer was found not in scrolls or tablets, but in the very ground beneath the travelers' feet. They began to use the most durable and available material at their disposal, stone. By arranging rocks in specific, intentional patterns, they could create messages that transcended language. A spiral might indicate a turning point. A pile of stones could mark a burial site or a place of offering, and an arrow-shaped arrangement would point the way towards safety or settlement. This was the dawn of stone patterning, a brilliant, non-verbal language etched into the landscape itself, turning the trade corridors into a vast, open-air communication network that anyone, regardless of origin, could learn to read. So how did this system actually work in practice? Let's break down the ingenious mechanics of stone patterning. Think of it as an ancient, three-dimensional road sign language. A traveler approaching a fork in a desolate path might find a small, carefully constructed pyramid of stones. This wasn't just a random pile. Its size, the number of rocks used, and its specific placement could indicate that the left path led to a settlement 2 days' walk away, while the right path was shorter but more treacherous, perhaps skirting a cliff edge. The patterns were a code, and learning to read this code was as essential for an ancient merchant as knowing how to navigate a GPS is for a modern delivery driver. The vocabulary of this stone language was rich and varied. A simple circle of stones might encircle a reliable water source, a message more precious than gold in arid regions. A series of small cairns placed at intervals could act like mile markers, letting a weary traveler know exactly how far they were from the next resting point. More complex patterns, like a zigzag or a series of parallel lines carved into a large flat rock, might serve as a universal warning, perhaps indicating quicksand, a predator's den, or a region prone to rock slides. In some cultures, the type of stone itself held meaning. A white quartzite rock placed atop a cairn could signal a place of peace or trade, while a darker, sharper stone might be a symbol of danger or a territorial boundary. The sheer brilliance of this system lay in its elegant simplicity and profound durability. Unlike a written note on parchment or papyrus, which could fade, tear, or rot away in a single rainy season, a message built from stone could last for generations. It was immune to the elements, standing firm against scorching sun, driving rain, and howling wind. This permanence transformed trade routes into living archives. A trader could be following a stone marker that his own grandfather had placed decades earlier, a tangible connection to the past that guided the commerce of the present. It was a communication network that required no maintenance, no translators, and no expensive materials, just human ingenuity and the abundant resources of the natural world. This universality was its greatest strength, A written message in cuneiform would be meaningless to a trader who only understood hieroglyphics, but a large arrow made of stones pointing towards a valley. That was a message anyone could understand, a pile of stones signifying a grave, a universally recognized symbol of respect and warning. By bypassing the need for a shared alphabet or spoken language, stone patterning created a truly democratic form of communication. It didn't matter if you were a Phoenician sailor, a Celtic artisan, or a nomadic herder. The language of the land was open to all who learned to observe it. This visual, intuitive system tore down the towering barriers of linguistics, allowing for a flow of goods and ideas that helped weave the diverse tapestry of early human civilization. To truly grasp the power of this stone language, we can look to one of history's most magnificent examples, the breathtaking road network of the Inca Empire. Envision a realm stretched across some of the most extreme terrain on Earth, from the soaring peaks of the Andes to the dense Amazonian rainforest. Connecting this vast empire was an engineering marvel, a web of roads spanning an almost unimaginable 24,000 miles. This was a system of unparalleled ambition, and it was made navigable not by written signs, but by a sophisticated and deeply spiritual use of stone. Along these high-altitude paths, travelers would frequently encounter apashitas. These were not mere random piles of rocks, they were intentionally constructed cairns, each one a layered message. On the most practical level, an apashita marked a trail, especially at a critical junction or a high mountain pass where the path might vanish into mist or snow. It was a reassuring signpost saying, "You are on the right path, others have come this way before." But the meaning went far deeper. Each traveler, upon passing, would add a stone to the pile. This act was both a personal offering for safe passage to the mountain gods, or apus, and a communal contribution to the ever-growing marker. An apashita was a physical record of countless journeys, a collective prayer made visible in stone, seamlessly blending the practical need for navigation with a profound spiritual connection to the landscape. The system's sophistication extended to the tambos, which were state-built way stations spaced a day's travel apart. At these crucial rest stops, the stone patterning became even more detailed. Arrangements of rocks on the ground or on walls could direct a weary messenger to a nearby spring, indicate which storage building held maize versus potatoes, or point the way toward the next tambo on the route. This was vital information for the Inca's famous relay runners, the chasquis, who carried messages and perishable goods like fresh fish from the coast to the highland capital at Cusco. They needed to move with incredible speed and could not afford to stop and ask for directions. The silent, immediate guidance from these patterned stones allowed the entire communication and supply network to operate with stunning efficiency, binding the empire together without a single written word. What makes the Inca example so compelling is this holistic integration. The roads themselves were messages, the stones were prayers, and the landscape was a living map. A chasqui running the trails didn't just see a pile of rocks. He saw a spiritual landmark, a navigational aid, and a testament to the collective strength of the empire all in one. This system was perfectly adapted to its environment and its culture, proving that effective communication isn't always about complexity. Sometimes, it's about understanding the deep, symbolic connections between people, their beliefs, and the world they travel through. Now, let's journey from the high Andes to the vast, windswept deserts of Central Asia, where another legendary network relied on this silent language of stone, the Silk Road. This wasn't a single road but a sprawling web of routes connecting the empires of China and Rome, a conduit for silk, spices, precious metals, and most importantly, ideas. But traversing this corridor meant facing some of the most unforgiving landscapes on the planet, places where conventional navigation simply failed. In the heart of this network lay the Taklamakan Desert, a name that translates ominously to place of no return. Here, trails weren't just paths, they were fleeting impressions in sand, constantly erased and reshaped by the wind. In an environment where a written map could become obsolete in a single sandstorm, traders needed something more permanent, more resilient. Their solution was to write their directions directly onto the desert itself, using the only medium that could withstand its fury, stone. The patterns they devised were models of clarity and efficiency, born from absolute necessity. A caravan master leading his camels through the dunes would constantly scan the horizon for these life-saving markers. A long, linear arrangement of dark stones might trace the crest of a dune, indicating the safest and most stable path to follow, avoiding the soft, treacherous sands below. Upon finding a crucial water source, a traveler might encounter a circle of white quartz stones encircling the oasis, a universal symbol that screamed, "Water here," to anyone who saw it, regardless of whether they spoke Sogdian, Persian, or Chinese. Perhaps the most vital symbol was the arrow, a carefully crafted arrowhead made of stones, pointing unambiguously in a specific direction, could guide a parched group to a hidden well or steer them away from a bandit-infested canyon. These were not subtle hints, they were stark, unambiguous commands for survival. This system's true genius was its intercultural design. The Silk Road was a melting pot of languages, religions, and customs. A written message in one script would be gibberish to another group, but a stack of stones, that was a language everyone could learn. A tall, stable cairn, visible from a distance, often signaled the proximity of a caravanserai or a settlement, a promise of rest, trade, and safety. The number of stones in a stack could even convey approximate distance. 3 stones might mean a 3-day journey, a simple code that bypassed complex linguistic explanations. This created a remarkable level of cooperation and trust among competitors. A Chinese merchant heading west might add a stone to a cairn to reinforce a warning, indirectly aiding a Roman trader coming from the opposite direction days later. They were rivals in commerce, but in the face of the desert's indifference, they became collaborators in survival, maintaining a shared communication network that benefited all. Through this silent, stony dialogue, the Silk Road thrived for centuries. It wasn't just silk and spices that flowed along these routes, but Buddhism moving from India to China, glassmaking techniques traveling from the Middle East to the Far East, and astronomical knowledge passing in both directions. The stone patterns were the humble, indispensable groundwork that made this grand exchange possible. They ensured that the caravans, the lifeblood of empires, could keep moving, fostering an interconnectedness that shaped the ancient world. It was a testament to a shared human understanding that sometimes the simplest messages, etched in the most durable materials, can build the most complex and beautiful bridges between cultures. But these stone patterns were far more than just functional signposts. They were a sophisticated symbolic language, a visual code that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. The symbols chosen were never random or haphazard. They were meticulously drawn from a shared pool of knowledge, a common understanding of the world that connected diverse cultures. This visual vocabulary was built from 3 powerful sources: the shapes of the natural world, the movements of the heavens above, and the deep well of cultural stories and beliefs. A spiral, for example, is a shape found in swirling water, in unfurling ferns, and in the very galaxies overhead. It's a universal symbol of cyclical movement, of a journey that continues onward. Placed along a path, a spiral pattern might indicate not just a turning point, but the idea of a long, ongoing expedition, a loop that would eventually bring the traveler back to their starting point. In contrast, a sharp, jagged zigzag carved into a rock face immediately calls to mind a lightning bolt or a treacherous mountain range. Its meaning was instinctively understood as a clear warning: danger ahead, proceed with extreme caution. This immediate, intuitive recognition was the system's greatest strength. The language of stone extended beyond simple shapes into more nuanced details like color and quantity. The choice of rock itself could radically alter a message's meaning. In many cultures, a stone with a striking red hue, perhaps colored by iron oxide, was not chosen for mere aesthetics. Red, the color of blood and fire, was a powerful, almost universal signal for peril. A pile of red stones might mark a territory prone to landslides, a path frequented by predators, or even a site of past conflict. Conversely, white stones like pale quartz or limestone often evoked purity, safety, and clarity. A circle of white pebbles around a spring didn't just mark water. It signaled that the water was safe to drink, a place of refuge and replenishment. The number of stones in a cairn could also act as a simple code. 3 stones might indicate a distance of 3 days' travel to the next major landmark, while a single, large standing stone could signify a singular, important point like a border or a primary trading post. This layered system of shape, color, and number created a rich and flexible lexicon. For this system to function, this symbolic vocabulary couldn't be a secret. It required a shared understanding that was carefully cultivated and passed down through generations. This knowledge was primarily transmitted through oral traditions. Around campfires at caravanserais, seasoned traders would instruct newcomers in the meanings of the patterns they would encounter. Elders would share stories that embedded these symbols into cultural memory, perhaps telling a cautionary tale about a trader who ignored a zigzag marking and met with disaster. This repeated exposure from story and from direct experience on the trail turned abstract symbols into a second nature. A young merchant didn't need to consult a manual. The sight of a specific arrangement would trigger an ingrained understanding, a collective wisdom whispered from the past. This process transformed the trade routes themselves into a vast, open-air classroom where the curriculum was written in stone. Ultimately, this shared symbology did something remarkable. It transcended the barriers of verbal language to create a new, visual one. A trader from Mesopotamia and a herder from the steppes might have been unable to exchange a single spoken word, but they could both look at a pattern of stones and understand its urgent message. This visual language became the great unifier along these ancient corridors of exchange. It embodied the collective intelligence of countless travelers who had gone before, each adding their observations to this growing body of knowledge. It was a language without a dictionary, yet its grammar was precise. It was a language without an alphabet, yet its characters were unmistakable. It encoded not just directions, but values, warnings, and a deep, respectful understanding of the landscape and its perils. This silent, stony dialogue was the true bedrock of ancient trade, enabling cooperation and trust between strangers and weaving separate communities into a connected, interdependent world. While the development of writing was undoubtedly one of humanity's most transformative achievements, it's fascinating to consider that for the specific, urgent needs of long-distance trade in antiquity, the humble arrangement of stones often held a distinct and powerful advantage. Early writing systems, for all their sophistication, came with a set of limitations that stone patterning cleverly bypassed. Imagine a trader on the Silk Road, a man who might be brilliantly skilled in bargaining, animal husbandry, and desert survival, but who had never learned to read or write. To him, a scroll inscribed with elegant Chinese characters or Aramaic script would be nothing more than a meaningless collection of lines. Literacy in these ancient times was a specialized skill, often confined to scribes, priests, and the elite. Stone patterning, in stark contrast, was a truly democratic language. It demanded no formal education. Its vocabulary was learned through observation and oral tradition, making it accessible to anyone who traveled the routes from the wealthiest merchant to the most humble porter. This universal accessibility ensured that critical information could be disseminated to and understood by the entire trading community, not just a literate few. Beyond the barrier of literacy lay the even greater challenge of linguistic diversity. The ancient trade corridors were bustling, noisy babels of countless languages and dialects. A message written in the Sumerian cuneiform of Mesopotamia would be utterly incomprehensible to a trader from the Indus Valley civilization. This created a massive communication gap that could hinder trade and even endanger lives. Stone patterns elegantly solved this problem by operating on a principle of universal visual cues. A pile of rocks indicating a grave site, an arrow pointing toward water, a zigzag warning of a cliff. These are symbols that transcend spoken language. They tap into a more fundamental, shared human experience of the world. A trader from Egypt and a merchant from Anatolia might share no common words, but they could both instantly recognize and interpret the silent warning in a carefully arranged pattern of stones. This system fostered a remarkable level of intercultural cooperation, creating a common ground where commerce and safe passage could thrive above the din of linguistic confusion. There was also the pressing issue of durability and the relentless assault of time and weather. Early writing materials were notoriously fragile. Papyrus scrolls could tear, fade, or dissolve in humidity. Wax tablets could melt in the heat. Inked inscriptions on bamboo or wood could be washed away by rain or erased by sandstorms. A written message left on a remote trail had a very short shelf life. Stone, however, was the ancient world's ultimate hard drive. A message carved or arranged in rock could withstand centuries of sun, wind, rain, and snow. It was impervious to pests, rot, and fire. This permanence was absolutely critical for maintaining long-distance trade networks. A stone cairn marking a safe mountain pass built by one generation would still be standing, clear and legible, for their grandchildren's grandchildren to use. It created a persistent, reliable communication infrastructure that required no maintenance, a permanent record of collective knowledge etched directly into the landscape itself. Finally, consider the sheer speed and efficiency of communication in a high-stakes environment. A trader leading a heavily laden caravan through dangerous territory doesn't have the time to stop, unroll a scroll, and carefully decipher a complex written message. Theirs is a world of immediate life-or-death decisions. Stone patterning catered to this need for instant comprehension. The meaning of a pattern was designed to be grasped in a split second. A quick glance at a formation of rocks was all it took to understand the message. This intuitive, rapid-fire communication allowed for swift navigation and immediate reaction to dangers. There was no room for ambiguity or lengthy translation. In the demanding context of ancient travel, where a moment's hesitation could mean missing a vital water source or stumbling into an ambush, the speed and clarity of stone patterns made them not just a useful tool, but an essential technology for survival and success. For centuries, the existence of these stone message systems was known primarily through oral histories and tantalizing references in the accounts of early explorers. It is only through the meticulous work of modern archaeology that we have moved from speculation to solid evidence, unearthing the physical proof that these intricate landscapes of communication were real. The ground itself has begun to speak, revealing patterns and placements that confirm the sophisticated use of stone as a language. Each excavation and survey adds another piece to the puzzle, allowing us to reconstruct not just the patterns themselves, but the lives of the people who relied on them. These discoveries transform ancient trade routes from abstract concepts into tangible pathways, marked with the intentional signatures of our ancestors. Some of the most compelling evidence comes from the high Andes, where archaeologists working along the Quhapac-Ñan, the great Inca road system, have documented thousands of stone cairns or apachetas with a precision that reveals their true complexity. Initially, they might appear as simple piles of rock, but through careful mapping and astronomical analysis, researchers have discovered that many of these cairns are precisely aligned with celestial events. A specific cluster might line up perfectly with the rising sun during the winter solstice, casting a long, arrow-like shadow that points directly toward a distant mountain pass. Another group could be arranged to frame the Southern Cross constellation on a clear night, providing a fixed celestial compass for travelers navigating the featureless Altiplano under the cover of darkness. This fusion of astronomy and practical wayfinding shows a deep understanding of the natural world, turning the entire landscape into a giant, calibrated navigational instrument. Parallel discoveries have emerged from the arid regions of the Middle East, along the fringes of what was once the vast Silk Road network. Here, archaeologists have uncovered what they term stone arrays, deliberate, geometric arrangements of rocks placed near the ruins of ancient caravanserais, those crucial overnight stops for weary caravans. Unlike the monumental cairns of the Andes, these patterns are often low to the ground, designed to be read by someone standing nearby. One common formation is a series of parallel lines pointing in a specific direction, almost certainly indicating the correct path to take after leaving the station. Another frequent find is a circular pattern with a single stone placed outside the ring, which experts believe may have functioned as a primitive sundial or a marker signaling the time of day when the next caravan was expected to depart. These silent sentinels guided the flow of people and goods with quiet efficiency. What makes these archaeological sites even richer are the artifacts frequently found in direct association with the stone patterns. It's not uncommon for excavators to discover small, worn-down tools made of chert or obsidian buried beside a cairn, suggesting that travelers would stop to sharpen their blades or repair their gear at these recognized points, perhaps adding a stone to the pile as they did so. Even more evocative are the ritual offerings often uncovered. In Peru, small, beautifully carved llama figurines made of semi-precious stone have been found at the base of apachetas, left as votive offerings to the mountain gods for protection. In the Negev Desert, excavations near stone arrays have revealed small caches of beads, coins, or even fragments of incense, likely left as thanks for a safe journey or as pleas for one ahead. These objects tell us that these sites were more than just signposts. They were places of ritual, anxiety, hope, and gratitude, blending the practical with the profoundly spiritual. The process of interpreting these findings is a fascinating discipline in itself, combining traditional archaeology with cutting-edge technology. Researchers now use drone photography and LiDAR, a laser mapping technique, to scan vast areas of terrain from the air, revealing patterns of stone arrangements that are invisible from the ground level. This aerial perspective has been revolutionary, showing that what might look like a random scattering of rocks from a human vantage point is actually part of a much larger, intentional design when seen from above. Ground-penetrating radar is used to investigate what lies beneath these sites without disturbing them, sometimes revealing older, buried layers of patterning that show how these message systems evolved over centuries. Each technological advance peels back another layer of time, allowing us to read this stony language with greater fluency and understand the daily rhythms of ancient trade, from the moment a caravan set out at dawn to the silent prayers offered at a cairn under a blanket of stars. Yet to view these stone patterns solely as ancient road signs is to miss half their story. They were far more than functional markers. They were sacred expressions of culture, belief, and community, woven into the very fabric of daily life. For the people who built them, the act of placing a stone was rarely a mundane chore. It was often a deeply ritualized practice, a moment of connection with forces greater than themselves. A traveler pausing to add a rock to a cairn at a high mountain pass wasn't just maintaining a trail marker, they were participating in a centuries-old tradition. This act was a silent prayer, an offering to the spirits of the mountain, the wind, or the ancestors, pleading for protection on the perilous journey ahead. It transformed a solitary trek into a communal conversation with the divine, linking the individual to every traveler who had come before and everyone who would follow. This spiritual dimension is powerfully illustrated by the Tibetan tradition of the Ladise. Along the high, wind-swept passes of the Himalayas, travelers would encounter these distinctive stone mounds. To the uninitiated, they might resemble simple trail markers, but to those within the culture, they were so much more. Each Ladise was believed to be a dwelling place for a protective spirit, a guardian of that specific stretch of the route. The act of adding a stone was not just helpful, it was obligatory, a required gesture of respect to this unseen custodian. It was a way of saying, "I honor your domain and ask for your safe passage." Neglecting this duty was considered deeply foolish, potentially inviting misfortune, bad weather, or losing one's way. The Ladise served as a constant reminder that the journey was not just a physical challenge but a spiritual negotiation with the landscape. These shared rituals performed at stone sites became powerful engines for building social cohesion and trust among traders who might otherwise have been competitors or strangers. Imagine a caravanserai at a remote crossroads, a bustling oasis of noise and languages. At the end of a taxing day, merchants from vastly different cultures might gather near a significant stone pattern just outside the walls. Participating in a shared ritual, perhaps a silent moment of reflection, a simple offering, or the mutual rebuilding of a collapsed cairn, created a profound sense of common identity. It was a nonverbal agreement that said, "We are all in this together, subject to the same dangers and reliant on the same protections." This fostered a level of mutual trust that was essential for business. You were more likely to deal fairly with someone you had just stood beside in a moment of shared reverence. The stone patterns became anchors for a mobile community, establishing codes of conduct and mutual respect that enabled trade to flourish across cultural divides. This fusion of the practical and the spiritual elevated the stone patterns from simple tools into potent symbols. A particular formation wasn't just a sign for water, it was a symbol of life and renewal, blessed by tradition. A warning pattern wasn't just about a physical hazard. It represented the community's collective care for the well-being of its members. They became tangible expressions of a group's worldview, their relationship with their environment, and their hopes and fears. They encoded not only geographic knowledge but also cultural values, the importance of hospitality, the respect for nature's power, and the acknowledgement of the unseen world. This layered meaning ensured their preservation. A community would maintain a spiritual marker with a devotion they might not extend to a purely practical sign, ensuring the survival of the navigational information it contained for generations. The stones, therefore, became keepers of both direction and tradition, guiding the feet and the spirit in equal measure along the ancient roads of the world. Now let's turn our gaze northward to the deep, ancient forests of Europe, where another legendary trade route whispered its secrets through stone. This was the Amber Road, a network of pathways that carried one of the ancient world's most magical commodities, amber, the gold of the north. This fossilized tree resin, washed up on the shores of the Baltic Sea, was prized for its beauty, its supposed mystical properties, and its ability to hold a static charge, a phenomenon so strange to the ancients that they called it electron, believing it held the very essence of life. But getting this treasure from the foggy Baltic coasts to the sun-drenched markets of Rome and Greece was a monumental task. The route cut through vast, trackless woodlands where a path could be swallowed by undergrowth in a single season. In this challenging environment, traders developed a unique and enduring system of stone patterning to light their way. The primary challenge along the northern stretches of the Amber Road was visibility. Unlike the open deserts of the Silk Road, the dense, primeval forests of Germania and Prussia created a perpetual twilight where the sun was often obscured by a thick canopy of leaves. In these shadowy realms, a trail could vanish with a heavy rain or the growth of summer ferns. To combat this, traders used clearings, natural or man-made openings in the forest, as their chalkboards. In these sunlit spaces, they would arrange stones in patterns that were large, bold, and impossible to miss. A long, straight line of white quartz rocks might cut across a clearing, pointing unerringly toward the next river crossing. A circle of stones with a single, larger rock at its center could indicate a reliable campsite or a place where multiple paths converged, a vital hub in the green maze. What makes the Amber Road story so captivating is how these practical markers were deeply infused with the local folklore and spiritual beliefs of the Germanic and Baltic peoples. The forests were not seen as empty spaces but as living, breathing entities filled with spirits both benevolent and mischievous. A trader wouldn't just place a stone, he might whisper a blessing over it, believing the arrangement itself held power. Certain formations, like a spiral or a triskelion, a three-armed spiral, were not just directional aids. They were potent symbols believed to ward off evil spirits that might lead travelers astray or bring bad luck. A stack of stones at the base of an ancient, gnarled oak tree might be an offering to the tree spirit itself, a plea for protection and safe passage through its domain. This transformed the act of navigation into a collaborative effort between humans and the unseen world. The incredible durability of these stone messages was their greatest asset in the harsh northern climate. While a wooden sign would rot or a painted symbol would fade, the stone patterns endured. They stood firm against the relentless snows of winter, remained visible after autumn leaves buried the forest floor, and resisted the wear of centuries. This permanence created a cumulative effect. A pattern established by a trader in the Bronze Age could still be used and added to by a Roman-era merchant, and then again by a Viking trader centuries later. Each generation maintained and reinforced the messages of the last, turning the Amber Road into a palimpsest of stone with layer upon layer of meaning and use written across the landscape. It was a living archive that required no parchment and no ink, just the collective memory and respect of those who traveled the route. This robust communication network was the silent engine that allowed the Amber Road to flourish for over a millennium. It enabled a continuous and astonishing cultural exchange. Nordic amber, carved into beads and amulets by Baltic craftsmen, would travel south to be set in gold by Etruscan jewelers and eventually adorn the necks of Roman senators. In return, Mediterranean goods like wine, bronze, and glassware would travel north, influencing local art and culture. The stone patterns were the humble, steadfast guides that made this long-distance conversation possible. They ensured that a trader from the Baltic, who might never have seen the sea, could successfully navigate the continent to trade with someone from a culture he could scarcely imagine, all guided by the silent, steadfast language of stones laid down by countless predecessors. It was a system built on trust in the markers, trust in the shared rituals, and trust in the generations of traders who had already walked the path. This meticulous craft of stone patterning was a sophisticated blend of art and science, demanding an intimate knowledge of the local environment and its geological offerings. The selection process was the first critical step, far more deliberate than simply picking up any nearby rock. For markers intended to last generations, to define a border, mark a sacred site, or point toward a permanent mountain pass, builders sought out large, heavy boulders. Their sheer mass and deep-set placement made them immovable by weather, animals, or even human interference, ensuring the message endured. These were the eternal sentences in the landscape's language. In contrast, for more temporary or adaptive messages, perhaps to indicate that a seasonal river ford was currently safe to cross, or to mark a temporary hunting ground, smaller, lighter pebbles were ideal. Their very impermanence was a feature, not a flaw. They could be easily rearranged or removed as conditions changed, allowing the communication network to be dynamic and responsive. The visual clarity of the message was paramount, and color played a starring role in this silent vocabulary. Travelers scanning a monotonous gray landscape would instantly be drawn to a shock of white quartz or a streak of red iron-rich sandstone. These colors weren't chosen for mere decoration. They were high-contrast signals in a natural world. A brilliant white stone placed atop a cairn could be seen from a great distance, acting as a beacon. A cluster of dark, almost black stones might be used to form a warning symbol, their somber hue instinctively signaling caution. In some cultures, specific colors held deep symbolic meaning that augmented the message. A greenish stone might point toward a fertile valley or a source of vegetation, while a red pattern could be an unambiguous alert to danger, tapping into a near-universal human association with blood and peril. This strategic use of color transformed the patterns from simple shapes into emphatic, attention-grabbing statements. The geometry of the arrangements was anything but random. These ancient designers wielded fundamental principles of form and alignment with the precision of an engineer. Straight lines and arrows provided unambiguous directional guidance, cutting a clear visual path through the clutter of the natural world. Circles and spirals often denoted points of significance, a destination, a holy site, or a place to stop and rest. Perhaps most impressively, many patterns were carefully aligned with celestial bodies. A row of stones might be positioned to catch the first light of the summer solstice, its long shadow pointing the way forward like a giant sundial. Another might frame the North Star, providing a fixed, unchanging reference point for navigation under the vast, starry dome of the night sky. This celestial alignment turned the entire pattern into a permanent, weatherproof astronomical instrument. Beyond simple arrangement, some cultures took the extra step of enhancing the stones themselves. Using harder rocks as primitive chisels, they would carve simple yet powerful symbols into the surface of a large, flat stone. A series of cup-like depressions might represent the number of days travel to a destination. A zigzag carved into a rock at a cliff's edge needed no translation. A spiral could symbolize the journey itself or the cyclical nature of trade and seasons. This practice of petroglyphic enhancement added a layer of specificity and durability, etching the message directly into the stone's very fabric. It was the difference between a handwritten note and a printed sign, adding a degree of permanence and artistic intention that elevated the communication. Finally, the placement of these patterns was a study in strategic thinking. They were never hidden or placed arbitrarily. The goal was maximum visibility for a weary traveler who might be struggling against the elements. High points were favored: the crest of a hill, the top of a ridge where the pattern would be silhouetted against the sky. River crossings, those inevitable and often dangerous choke points, were always marked, providing crucial guidance on the safest place to cross. The patterns were placed at eye level and along the natural sidelines of the path, ensuring they would be encountered without the traveler having to actively search for them. This thoughtful placement demonstrates a profound empathy for the user, an understanding of the traveler's exhaustion and need for clear, immediate information. It was a user-centric design philosophy etched in stone, crafted by people who knew the road's hardships intimately and built a system to make the journey just a little bit safer for those who would follow. Now, let's shift our perspective to one of the most formidable landscapes on Earth, the Sahara Desert. Envision an ocean of sand stretching to the horizon, a place where the very concept of a permanent path is laughable, as dunes shift and reshape themselves with every gust of wind. In this brutally unforgiving environment, where a wrong turn could mean a slow, agonizing death by thirst, the Trans-Saharan trade routes emerged as astonishing feats of human endurance and ingenuity. For centuries, caravans of thousands of camels, led by resilient Tuareg and Berber traders, crossed this sea of sand, transporting immense wealth in the form of gold, salt, and other precious commodities between the empires of West Africa and the markets of the Mediterranean. Their survival and the success of this monumental trade hinged on a sophisticated and silent language written in stone, a system they called alamat. The term alamat itself speaks volumes, often translating to signs or markers, but its meaning runs far deeper in the cultural context of the desert dwellers. These were not casual piles of rock. They were meticulously crafted messages, a vital lifeline in a landscape that offered no others. The primary, most urgent message was always water. In the Sahara, knowledge of a hidden oasis wasn't just valuable, it was the difference between life and death. The alamat for a water source was therefore the most sacred and carefully maintained pattern. It might be a large, single standing stone placed prominently near the water, or a specific arrangement of darker stones in a circular pattern around the oasis's edge, visible against the pale sand. To a parched caravan, the sight of this specific formation was a moment of pure relief, a silent promise of survival. But the alamat system was a complex and nuanced vocabulary. Beyond water, these stone signs served as a complete desert survival guide. A series of smaller cairns might trace a safe path through a region of soft, unstable sand that could swallow a camel whole. A distinct zigzag pattern carved onto a rare, exposed rock face could warn of a nearby region plagued by frequent, violent sandstorms, the kind that could disorient a caravan and erase trails in minutes. For the pastoralist tribes involved in the trade, patterns made with green-tinged stones might point toward sporadic patches of desert grass, crucial grazing areas for the camels that were the engines of the entire enterprise. The precision of these messages was non-negotiable. A misinterpreted pattern could doom an entire caravan. This practical guidance was inextricably woven with profound cultural and spiritual significance. The Tuareg, often called the blue men of the desert for their indigo robes, viewed the desert not as an empty wasteland but as a sacred space filled with history and memory. Their stone arrays often marked burial sites, ensuring that the graves of respected leaders or loved ones were not lost to the shifting sands. These sites became more than just memorials. They served as secondary landmarks and places for quiet reflection during the long, silent journeys. Other patterns marked important meeting points, places where different nomadic groups would convene for festivals, dispute resolutions, or to arrange large caravans. At these sites, the act of adding a stone to a communal pile was a sign of respect and participation in the social fabric of the desert. The sheer durability of this stone language was its ultimate advantage in the Saharan environment. A parchment map would be torn to shreds by the wind. A wooden sign would be buried by sand or bleached into illegibility by the relentless sun. But a well-built alamat constructed from heavy, local stone could endure for generations. It would stand firm against howling sandstorms that would erase all other traces of human passage. This created a cumulative knowledge system. A marker built by a trader in the 10th century could still be used and maintained by his descendants in the 14th century, each generation adding to and refining the desert's guidebook. The alamat transformed the featureless Sahara into a mapped and knowable territory, its secrets held in the silent, steadfast language of stone, enabling one of history's most dramatic and vital long-distance trades. For all its ingenuity, this stone-based language was not a perfect system. Its effectiveness was deeply tied to the environment, and nature could be an uncooperative partner. In regions of dense, rapid jungle growth, a meticulously placed cairn could be swallowed by vines and underbrush within a single rainy season, vanishing from sight and leaving travelers hopelessly lost. River valleys, crucial arteries for trade, presented another constant headache. Seasonal floods could easily wash away smaller stone arrangements or shift the very riverbanks they were placed upon, rendering the messages obsolete or, worse, dangerously misleading. In these landscapes, the system demanded constant, vigilant maintenance. Trading communities often had to designate individuals or groups as dedicated keepers of the paths, tasked with regularly walking the routes to clear vegetation, rebuild washed-out markers, and ensure the silent language remained legible. This was a significant investment of time and labor, a hidden cost to this seemingly simple form of communication. Another significant vulnerability lay in the lack of universal standardization. While many symbols like arrows or warning zigzags were intuitively understood, their specific meanings could vary dramatically from one cultural region to the next. A spiral pattern might signify a safe spiritual resting place to one group, but to a neighboring culture, it could indicate a treacherous, winding path ahead. A trader venturing into unfamiliar territory, no matter how skilled at reading the stones of his homeland, could easily fall prey to a fatal misinterpretation. This risk created a natural limit to the range of any single trader and reinforced the importance of local guides. Knowledge of the local dialect of stone patterning became a valuable commodity in itself, something that experienced guides would pass down and use to secure their role in a caravan. This fragmentation meant the system worked best within well-established, culturally homogeneous trading blocks and could create dangerous confusion at the fuzzy borders where different symbolic traditions met. Perhaps the most fundamental limitation was the system's inherent simplicity. Stone patterning was brilliant for conveying immediate, vital information: turn here, danger there, water ahead. But it was utterly incapable of handling complexity. You could not use a pile of rocks to draft a trade contract, specify the exact price of a bolt of silk, record the lineage of a camel, or list the taxes owed to a local chieftain. It lacked the nuance for narrative, the specificity for numbers, and the flexibility for abstraction. A written tablet could record that Musa of Timbuktu promises to pay Ali of Cairo 10 gold dinars upon the delivery of 50 sacks of salt next spring. A stone pattern could only point toward Timbuktu and, if you were lucky, signal that salt was traded there. This inability to manage detailed records or agreements meant that for the actual business of commerce, the stone language was only the first step. Consequently, stone patterning was rarely a standalone system. it almost always existed in a symbiotic relationship with other forms of communication. It served as the initial handshake, the road signs that brought people together. Once face to face, the real work began through the rich tradition of oral negotiation. Complex deals were struck verbally, witnessed, and sealed with oaths and handshakes, their details committed to memory. In areas where writing was available, even in a basic form, it would immediately take over for these complex transactions. The arrival of a literate scribe at a trading post was a momentous occasion, as they could finally create the permanent records that gave merchants real security and allowed for more sophisticated economic systems to develop. The stone patterns were the robust, durable backbone of the journey, but the flesh and blood of trade, the deals, the stories, the contracts relied on the human voice and the written word. It was a hybrid model, each method compensating for the weaknesses of the other to create a resilient and adaptable network for human connection. It's remarkable to consider how this ancient practice of arranging stones to guide travelers has left a direct and visible legacy in our modern world. Step onto any marked hiking trail today, from the Appalachian Trail in the United States to the Camino de Santiago in Spain, and you are walking in the footsteps of those ancient traders. The cairns that hikers diligently build and follow are the direct descendants of the Apashitas and Alamat, serving the exact same purpose: to provide clear, unambiguous guidance through often challenging and disorienting terrain. These modern stone piles are a testament to the timeless effectiveness of this simple technology, a non-verbal agreement among strangers to help each other find the way. They are maintained not by any official agency, but by the collective action of the hiking community, a beautiful echo of the communal upkeep that sustained ancient trade routes for centuries. This principle of using universal, intuitive symbols extends far beyond the wilderness and into our daily lives, often in ways we scarcely notice. Every time you walk into an airport and follow the icon of an airplane to the departure gates, or glance at the universal symbols for a restroom on a door, you are benefiting from the same core idea that powered ancient stone patterning. Our globalized world, with its breathtaking mix of languages, has rediscovered the power of the pictogram. These simple images transcend linguistic barriers, conveying complex information like emergency exits, prohibited actions, or transportation hubs with instant clarity. The development of these international symbol systems was a conscious effort to create a new visual language for the modern age, and its philosophical underpinnings are identical to those of the ancient traders: to communicate vital information quickly and effectively to anyone, regardless of their native tongue. The ancient desire to create messages that endure far beyond a single lifetime is also experiencing a powerful resurgence. The durability of stone, which allowed patterns to guide generations of traders, now inspires projects aimed at communicating with the far future. Consider the ongoing challenge of nuclear waste storage sites, which will remain hazardous for tens of thousands of years. How do we warn future civilizations of the danger buried there? The solutions proposed are strikingly familiar. They involve designing massive, permanent earthworks and stone monoliths engraved with warning symbols and information. These projects, sometimes called narrative architecture, are a modern attempt to create the ultimate cairn, a marker that can withstand millennia and convey its message without the need for a shared language, directly channeling the ancient wisdom of stone. This enduring human impulse to leave a lasting mark, to say, "I was here for those who will come after," connects us directly to our ancestors. From the prehistoric hand stencils in cave paintings to the graffiti carved by Roman soldiers on distant forts, and from the stone patterns on ancient trails to the modern tradition of leaving a small rock on a Jewish headstone or a military memorial, we have always sought tangible ways to signify presence, memory, and respect. The materials may change. Sometimes it's stone, sometimes it's bronze, sometimes it's digital data etched on archival disks, but the fundamental desire remains unchanged. We are driven to create durable signals, to embed our knowledge and our stories into the landscape itself, ensuring that the path we forged, the warning we discovered, or the memory we cherish does not fade away with the passing of a single season, but endures as a guide and a comfort for the travelers of the future. Crossing into the landscapes of pre-Columbian North America, we find a different kind of trade network flourishing, one woven through dense forests across wide rivers and over rolling plains. Here, the continent's original inhabitants engineered complex exchange systems that moved vast quantities of highly valued goods. Copper from the Great Lakes region, painstakingly hammered into ornate ceremonial objects, could find its way to the Gulf Coast. Glimmering seashells from the Atlantic were traded for volcanic glass from the West, while finely crafted pottery and rare pigments changed hands across thousands of miles. This was not random barter. It was a sophisticated, continent-wide economy operating long before European contact, and its pathways were silently guided by an intricate language of stone. The routes themselves were ancient and well-established, with one of the most significant being the Great Indian Warpath. Despite its modern name, this pathway was far more vital for commerce and communication than for conflict. Stretching for hundreds of miles along the eastern Appalachian Mountains, it served as a superhighway connecting the culturally diverse tribes of the Southeast with those of the Northeast. Traveling such a vast and varied landscape required a reliable navigation system, and that's where the stone patterning came into play. Unlike the monumental cairns of the Andes, many of these markers were subtler, designed to be read by those who knew what to look for. A carefully balanced stack of rocks here, a pattern of stones embedded in a creek bank there, all blending seamlessly into the natural world yet standing out as clear signals to the initiated traveler. The symbols used in these arrangements were deeply rooted in a shared understanding of the natural and spiritual worlds, creating a visual vocabulary that could transcend linguistic differences. A pattern incorporating a serpentine motif might warn of a dangerous river crossing or a territory where snakes were prevalent. An arrangement of stones that echoed the shape of a bear paw could point toward a productive hunting ground or a sacred site associated with the bear spirit. Perhaps most remarkably, some patterns incorporated celestial alignments. A line of stones might be positioned so that the rising sun on the summer solstice cast a shadow directly along the path to be taken, or a circular formation could frame a specific star at a certain time of year, turning the entire landscape into a calendar and compass for guiding long seasonal journeys. This shared symbolic language was the key that unlocked peaceful interaction and cooperation among incredibly diverse cultural groups. A Cherokee trader traveling north and a Mohawk trader heading south might speak languages that were completely alien to one another, yet they could both understand the stone markers guiding them to a common neutral trading ground. These patterns effectively said, "This way to a place of safe exchange," or "Fresh water is available nearby," or "Proceed with caution beyond this point." By providing this universal guidance, the stone patterns helped to depersonalize potential conflicts and establish a framework for predictable, peaceful encounters. They created a neutral ground where the primary language was not Cherokee or Iroquoian, but the mutually beneficial language of trade. The ultimate result was the fostering of a remarkable level of intercultural dialogue and mutual influence. At these trading junctures, more than just goods were exchanged. Ideas, artistic styles, technological innovations, and even religious concepts flowed along these stony pathways. The design motifs on a piece of Mississippian pottery might show influences from a distant culture, adopted because they were aesthetically pleasing or spiritually powerful. Stories and knowledge about medicinal plants, astronomical events, and historical migrations were shared around fires at these trading sites, all facilitated by the initial trust built by successfully following the same silent stone guides. This system demonstrates that the absence of a shared written language is not a barrier to complex societal organization. In fact, it can inspire ingenious alternative methods of communication that not only facilitate trade but actively build bridges of understanding and peaceful coexistence between very different worlds. Yet this monumental shift was far from instantaneous or total. The transition from stone to script unfolded over centuries, a slow and uneven process that mirrored the gradual spread of literacy itself. In remote highlands, across vast deserts, and along secluded forest trails, the ancient language of stone persisted with remarkable tenacity. For nomadic herders in the steppes of Central Asia, a carved warning on a rock remained a more reliable and immediate signal than a scroll they couldn't read. In the Scottish Highlands, clans continued to use cairns to mark boundaries and paths long after the lowlands had adopted written deeds and maps. These patterns became the communication method of the periphery, enduring among communities that were geographically isolated or deliberately resistant to the centralized control that often accompanied literacy. Their continued use is a powerful testament to the resilience of traditional knowledge systems, proving that a technology doesn't need to be complex to be profoundly effective and culturally enduring. This period of overlap reveals a fascinating story of coexistence and adaptation, not a simple replacement. For a very long time, written and stone-based systems worked in tandem, each playing to its unique strength. A traveling merchant might carry a written bill of sale or a letter of introduction, documents that handled the complex specifics of his business agreements. But on the road, he would still rely utterly on the silent guidance of stone cairns to navigate a mountain pass or find the next caravanserai. The written word managed the abstract, the contracts, the accounts, the inventories. The stone patterns managed the immediate, physical reality of the journey. They were complementary technologies, one dealing with the world of commerce and law, the other with the raw challenge of geography and survival. This hybrid approach was a practical acknowledgement that no single system could meet every human need. The persistence of these patterns also speaks to a deeper, more human truth about trust and accessibility. A written message requires faith in the author's honesty and the interpreter's skill. A forged document or a mistranslated word could lead to ruin, but a stone marker, weathered by time and added to by countless anonymous hands, carried a different kind of authority, the weight of collective experience and consensus. It was a democratic technology, open to all who learned its visual grammar, free from the gatekeeping of scribes and scholars. This inherent accessibility ensured its survival. Long after empires rose and fell based on their written records, the humble stone cairn continued to offer its silent, unbiased guidance to anyone who passed by, a steadfast reminder of a more universal and enduring form of communication. The Romans, celebrated for their engineering marvels and meticulous record-keeping, present a fascinating case study in the evolution of ancient communication, demonstrating a remarkably pragmatic blend of the old and the new. While their famous inscribed milestones, or miliaria, are well documented bearing the name of the emperor who commissioned the road and the exact distance to the next major town, this was only one layer of their sophisticated guidance system. For all the power and prestige of the written Latin word, the Roman Empire was a vast tapestry of cultures and languages, and a significant portion of its population, including many within its own legions, remained non-literate. To ensure the seamless flow of troops, trade, and information across their sprawling territories, Roman engineers seamlessly integrated the timeless language of stone patterning right alongside their written signs. This hybrid approach was a masterclass in practical, user-centric design. A legionary on a forced march, weary and burdened with heavy gear, might not have the time or ability to stop and decipher a formal inscription. But he could instantly process a visual cue. On the approach to a treacherous mountain pass, for instance, the road might be flanked by a series of large, deliberately placed white stones. This unspoken signal would alert the entire column to the need for increased caution, preparing them for a steep and winding ascent long before they reached the actual incline. Similarly, when nearing a military zone or a fortified castrum, specific arrangements, perhaps a repeating pattern of 3 dark stones stacked vertically, could serve as a silent command to be alert and to prepare for a potential challenge from sentries. The system extended to civilian life and commerce with equal effectiveness. For a merchant arriving at a bustling crossroads town, an inscribed milestone might tell him he was 15 miles from Rome, but a pattern of stones embedded in the ground near the forum could direct him to the specific street of the blacksmiths or the public granaries. A circle of small, flat stones might indicate a public resting area with a water trough, while a pattern using distinctly colored imported stone could point the way to a luxurious bathhouse or an inn catering to wealthy travelers. This visual shorthand made complex urban centers navigable for visitors who spoke no Latin and for locals alike, streamlining daily life and reinforcing the Roman ideal of order and accessibility. What makes the Roman example so profoundly insightful is that it completely dismantles the notion of a linear progression from primitive to advanced communication. Here was the most administratively sophisticated empire of the ancient world, a civilization that produced unparalleled historical records, legal codes, and literary works, yet it still saw immense value in the ancient, nonverbal system of arranged stone. They recognized that true efficiency and safety for a diverse population required a multi-layered approach. The written word handled the official, the precise, and the permanent, the data for the archives. The stone patterns handled the immediate, the intuitive, and the imperative, the information needed in the moment for safe and efficient movement. This wasn't a case of one system replacing the other. It was a brilliant, simultaneous deployment of both, ensuring that every single person on the road, from an illiterate auxiliary soldier to a highly educated provincial official, had access to the critical information they needed. The Roman roads were not just feats of engineering, they were a masterpiece of inclusive communication, a network that truly spoke to everyone. So how do modern scholars make sense of these silent stone messages scattered across the globe? They approach them not as random piles of rock, but as complex texts waiting to be read, applying a fascinating array of theoretical frameworks to decode their meanings. One compelling perspective comes from the field of semiotics, the study of signs and symbols. From this viewpoint, each stone pattern is a sign composed of 2 parts: the signifier, which is the physical arrangement of rocks itself, and the signified, the concept it represents, like danger, water, or direction. Scholars analyzing these patterns ask questions like, why was a spiral chosen to represent a journey? Or how did a zigzag become universally understood as a warning? This approach treats the trade routes as a vast, open-air semiotic system, where meaning was negotiated and shared across cultures through repeated use and collective agreement, creating a stable language without a formal grammar book. Another powerful lens is that of cartography, but with a radical twist. These stone patterns are increasingly seen as a form of pre-literate mapmaking, a way of encoding geographical knowledge directly into the landscape. Unlike a paper map that you hold in your hands, these were three-dimensional maps that you physically moved through. A series of cairns didn't just point the way, they were the way, their very presence charting a route across an otherwise featureless desert or a dense forest. But these maps did more than just depict physical geography. They mapped cultural and spiritual geography too. A marker might indicate not just a mountain pass, but a sacred mountain, a place of origin stories, or a boundary between tribal territories. This transforms our understanding of ancient navigation from a simple point A to point B endeavor into a rich, layered experience of moving through a landscape that was both physically and culturally meaningful. The concept of material memory offers perhaps the most profound interpretation. This theory suggests that these arrangements acted as externalized hard drives for collective knowledge. In societies with strong oral traditions, crucial information about survival, history, and identity was stored in stories, songs, and rituals. Stone patterns served as durable, physical anchors for this intangible knowledge. The very act of building and maintaining a cairn was a ritual that reinforced the memory of its meaning. An elder teaching a young person the significance of a particular pattern wasn't just giving directions. They were transferring vital cultural data, with the stones serving as a permanent mnemonic device. This theory explains why these sites often feel so potent. They are quite literally places where memory has been crystallized into stone, allowing knowledge to be stored outside of human biology and preserved across generations. From a cognitive science standpoint, the effectiveness of stone patterning taps into something fundamental about the human brain. Our minds are exceptionally adept at pattern recognition. It's a survival skill that allows us to identify threats, find food, and navigate social cues. These ancient systems leverage this innate ability perfectly. The shapes used, arrows, circles, spirals, are what cognitive psychologists call supernormal stimuli, forms that are exceptionally easy for our brains to process and remember. This intuitive understandability is why a traveler from one culture could often correctly interpret the markers of another, even without prior exposure. The patterns worked because they aligned with the universal wiring of the human visual cortex, making them a truly borderless language based on shared biological hardware. These theoretical interpretations don't compete with each other. Instead, they weave together to form a richer, more complete picture. A single stone cairn can be all these things at once: a semiotic sign, a point on a map, a vessel of material memory, and a cognitive trigger. This multidisciplinary approach allows us to appreciate the sheer sophistication of these systems. They weren't crude precursors to writing. They were a parallel and brilliantly adapted technology for communication, perfectly suited to their time and purpose. They show us that human ingenuity in solving the problem of connection is incredibly diverse, and that sometimes the most advanced solution is not the most complex, but the most intuitive and enduring. Venturing into the vast and ancient landscape of Australia, we encounter perhaps the most profound and holistic example of this concept: the Aboriginal song lines. This system transcends the idea of mere pathways or stone markers. It represents a complete fusion of navigation, mythology, law, and identity, woven into the very fabric of the continent. For the Aboriginal peoples, the land is not just a territory to be crossed. It is a living, breathing narrative, and the songlines are the verses of that epic story. They are intricate sequences of knowledge that chart the paths of ancestral beings as they created the world during the Dreamtime, singing the names of every feature, every waterhole, every mountain, every rock formation into existence as they traveled. To follow a songline is to retrace the creative footsteps of these ancestors, navigating by mentally or physically revisiting the sequence of locations and their associated songs. While the entire landscape serves as the primary map, stones played a crucial and deliberate role in anchoring this knowledge to specific, tangible points. At a significant site along a songline, perhaps a place where an ancestor stopped to create a water source or where a great battle occurred, travelers might find a carefully arranged pattern of rocks. This wasn't a random act, it was a deliberate annotation on the land. A circle of stones might encircle a sacred site, marking it as a place for ceremony and forbidding entry to the uninitiated. A series of smaller cairns could trace the outline of a particular ancestral animal, its form visible only to those who knew the corresponding story. These stone arrangements acted as mnemonic triggers, physical prompts that reinforced the oral tradition. Seeing the pattern would instantly call to mind the specific verse of the song that described that place, ensuring the traveler was on the correct spiritual and physical path. This is where the sheer genius of the songlines becomes apparent. They are a multidimensional communication network. The knowledge isn't stored in just one medium. It's cross-referenced across an entire cultural ecosystem. The song provides the rhythm and the names. The stories provide the narrative context and the moral laws. The art, often painted on rock walls or carved into sacred stones, provides the visual representation. And the land itself provides the physical stage. A single stone marker is therefore not just a signpost, it is a hyperlink to an entire library of cultural information. To understand the marker is to access the song, which tells the story, which explains the art, which describes the land. This intricate interweaving created an incredibly robust and error-resistant system for preserving knowledge across millennia, ensuring that even if one element was forgotten, the others could help reconstruct it. This holistic approach underscores a fundamental philosophical difference: a world view where the environment and culture are not separate entities but a single, integrated whole. In Western traditions, we often create maps as separate objects, things we carry to navigate a world that exists independently of us. But in the Aboriginal tradition, you don't carry the map, you are a part of it. The songlines teach that humans are an inseparable component of the landscape, with a responsibility to care for it through ritual, story, and practice. This deep interconnectedness meant that navigation was never just about getting from point A to point B. It was an act of cultural renewal, a way of keeping the world alive by continuously singing it into being. The journey itself was a ritual, a way of maintaining the balance of the world. The endurance of the songlines, some believed to be tens of thousands of years old, stands as a powerful testament to the effectiveness of this integrated model. It demonstrates that the most resilient knowledge systems are those that are woven into the daily life, art, spirituality, and very geography of a people. It wasn't written on perishable parchment but performed on the enduring stage of the continent, with the songs serving as the living, breathing, and constantly reaffirmed record. The stone patterns along these routes were the punctuation marks in this grand epic, solid, permanent, and deeply meaningful points that guided travelers not only through the physical challenges of the outback, but also through the sacred responsibilities of their culture, connecting each step to the timeless journey of the ancestors. Today, the silent language of stone faces a cacophony of modern threats that could render it permanently mute. The very landscapes that once protected these ancient messages are now changing at an unprecedented pace. Urban sprawl and new infrastructure projects can plow through millennia-old pathways in a matter of days, erasing stone arrays that have guided travelers for centuries before anyone even realizes they were there. Climate change poses a more insidious danger. Intensified storms and flooding can wash away carefully placed cairns, while rising sea levels threaten to submerge coastal markers. Perhaps most disheartening is the thoughtless vandalism and looting. where ancient stones are kicked over for fun or carted away by souvenir hunters, severing an irreplaceable link to our collective human past. This isn't just about losing rocks, it's about losing a chapter of human ingenuity, a unique form of communication that speaks volumes about our ability to connect across barriers. In response to these growing threats, a global coalition of preservationists has mobilized, recognizing that safeguarding this heritage requires a multifaceted approach. International organizations like UNESCO play a crucial role by designating entire cultural routes, such as the Quhapak-Nyan Inca road system, as World Heritage Sites. This formal recognition isn't just an honorary title. It unlocks funding, fosters international cooperation, and encourages national governments to enact stronger protective legislation that makes damaging these sites a serious legal offense. Meanwhile, dedicated local heritage groups act as the boots on the ground, often comprised of archaeologists, historians, and passionate volunteers who regularly monitor vulnerable sites, gently rebuild damaged cairns using traditional methods, and serve as educators for their local communities. This combination of top-down legal protection and bottom-up, grassroots stewardship creates a vital safety net for these fragile resources. One of the most transformative shifts in modern conservation is the move toward collaborative stewardship with indigenous communities. For too long, archaeological preservation was something done to a site, often by outside experts with little input from the descendants of the people who created it. Today, the most successful projects are built on partnership and respect for traditional knowledge. In Peru, for instance, efforts to maintain the Apashitas and other markers along the Inca trails are now led in close collaboration with Quechua and other Andean communities. Their elders hold the oral histories that explain the deeper meanings of the patterns which formations are purely navigational and which hold spiritual significance, ensuring restoration work is both physically and culturally accurate. This approach acknowledges that these are not dead relics but living cultural landscapes, and their true preservation requires keeping the knowledge and traditions around them alive. Technology has emerged as a powerful ally in this race against time, offering new ways to document and analyze these sites with astonishing precision. Archaeologists now use drones equipped with high-resolution cameras and LiDAR laser scanning technology to create detailed 3D maps of vast areas, revealing patterns and alignments that are completely invisible to the naked eye from the ground. This digital documentation is more than just a record. It allows researchers to study the sites remotely and can even be used to create virtual reality experiences, making this heritage accessible to people across the globe. Satellite imagery is another critical tool, monitoring remote regions for signs of looting or environmental damage, enabling a rapid response before it's too late. In essence, we are now creating high-fidelity digital backups of these ancient messages, ensuring that even if the physical stones are lost, their form and meaning can be preserved for future generations to study and appreciate. These multifaceted initiatives, from international treaties to community partnerships and digital innovation, all underscore a profound and growing recognition of what is truly at stake. This is not merely about preserving interesting old trails. It is about safeguarding what UNESCO terms intangible cultural heritage. The stones themselves are tangible, but the knowledge they represent, the collective memory, the shared understanding of the landscape, the non-verbal codes of conduct that enabled peaceful trade, is an intangible treasure. By protecting the physical markers, we are also protecting the human stories and cognitive achievements they embody. These conservation efforts are a promise to the future, a commitment that we will not allow this remarkable chapter of human connection to be erased. ensuring that the whispers of the ancient roads will continue to be heard for centuries to come. While the Inca and Silk Road traders relied almost entirely on the silent language of stone, the mighty Persian Empire presents a fascinating evolution, a hybrid system that masterfully blended the old and the new. The Royal Road was an administrative marvel, a 1,500-mile engineered highway stretching from the Aegean Sea to the heart of modern-day Iran. To govern such a colossal realm, the Persians needed a communication network of unprecedented speed and reliability, leading to the creation of the legendary Angarium, or royal couriers. These riders were the nerve impulses of the empire, and their legendary efficiency famously summed up by the Greek historian Herodotus with the phrase, "Neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers," was made possible by a clever, two-tiered guidance system that used both writing and stone. In the well-patrolled and populated stretches near major cities, the system was one of impressive bureaucratic order. Inns and relay stations, known as stathmoi, were placed a day's ride apart, and official edicts and messages were transcribed onto parchment or clay tablets. But as the road snaked through the remote, rugged passes of the Zagros Mountains or across the arid plains of Anatolia, where a lone rider could easily lose the path, a different, more ancient language took over. Here, Persian engineers supplemented the written word with enduring stone arrays. A courier galloping at full speed couldn't afford to slow down to consult a complex written directive. Instead, he would scan the landscape for specific, instantly recognizable patterns carved into rock faces or arranged with white stones on a hillside. These patterns formed a swift and efficient visual shorthand for the Angarium. A common symbol was a simplified sun, often a circle with radiating lines. Spotting this carved at a fork in the trail would immediately tell the rider to take the path that faced the rising sun, ensuring he continued east toward the next major hub. Conversely, a pattern resembling a setting sun would point the way west. Arrow-shaped formations were even more direct, cutting through any potential ambiguity by pointing unearly toward the next way station or a crucial mountain pass. In more complex terrain, patterns might even hint at the time of day a certain path was safest to travel, perhaps indicating a shadowy gorge best traversed at noon when the sun was directly overhead, illuminating the dangers within. This pragmatic combination of technologies highlights the Persian genius for administration and their understanding of practical necessity. The written word was perfect for the complex, nuanced content of the messages themselves, the king's decrees, military orders, and detailed trade reports. But for the urgent, physical task of moving those messages across a vast and varied landscape at breakneck speed, the timeless, intuitive language of stone was irreplaceable. It ensured that a courier, whether he was a literate scribe or a hired rider chosen for his endurance, would never falter in his delivery. The Persian Royal Road, therefore, stands as a powerful testament to the idea that technological progress isn't always about replacement. Sometimes, the most advanced system is the one that seamlessly integrates the enduring wisdom of the past with the innovative tools of the present, creating a network robust enough to hold an empire together. These intricate networks of stone did far more than just guide feet and hooves. They quietly wove together the very fabric of ancient societies, creating a level of interconnection that was previously unimaginable. By providing a reliable, universal method of communication, these patterns dissolved the isolating barriers of distance and language, enabling a continuous and vibrant exchange that flowed in all directions. It wasn't merely goods that traveled these stony pathways, it was the very essence of human culture and innovation. A metallurgical technique perfected in the highlands could, over generations, find its way to a distant coastal village, carried not in a book, but in the knowledge of a trader who followed the markers. The subtle stylistic elements of a pottery design, a revolutionary approach to irrigation, or even a new strategy for animal husbandry could all diffuse across continents, slowly elevating the technological capabilities of entire regions through this silent, steady conversation. This exchange extended deeply into the realm of ideas and beliefs, fundamentally shaping the spiritual landscape of the ancient world. Religious concepts and artistic inspirations found fertile ground along these routes, carried by missionaries, pilgrims, and merchants alike. The spread of Buddhism from India through Central Asia and into China was profoundly facilitated by the safe passage ensured by these stone markers. Distinctive artistic motifs, like the Hellenistic influences found in statues from ancient Gandhara, are a direct testament to the cultural intermingling that these trade corridors made possible. The patterns themselves often absorb this spiritual significance, becoming not just guides for the body, but also for the soul, marking places of meditation, offering, or pilgrimage. This created a shared human heritage, a common pool of stories, symbols, and beliefs that transcended political borders and ethnic origins, fostering a nascent sense of global community. The legacy of this deep-seated human impulse to mark our passage and leave messages in the landscape is astonishingly resilient, echoing powerfully in modern practices that we often take for granted. The popular activity of geocaching, a global treasure hunt using GPS coordinates, is a direct digital age descendant of this ancient tradition. While the tools have evolved from stones to satellites, the core desire remains identical: the thrill of discovery, the satisfaction of following a trail left by another, and the joy of leaving a small token or message for the next person to find. It's a high-tech continuation of that same communal, exploratory spirit that once guided caravans across deserts. Similarly, the poignant tradition of building roadside memorials, those small crosses, piles of stones, or collections of flowers that mark the site of a tragedy, speaks to this timeless need. These spontaneous monuments are a modern, deeply personal form of stone patterning. They are a universal, non-verbal language of grief, remembrance, and warning, using the most available materials to convey a powerful message to any passerby. They require no inscription to be understood. Their meaning is immediately and intuitively grasped, connecting us to every ancient traveler who ever piled a stone to mark a grave or signal danger. These practices prove that our desire to communicate through tangible, physical markers is not a relic of the past, but a fundamental and enduring part of the human condition. This enduring influence underscores a profound and timeless truth about how we connect with one another and with the world around us. In our increasingly digital and abstract age, where communication happens at the speed of light through ephemeral pixels on a screen, there is something deeply grounding about the physicality of a stone marker. It represents a slower, more deliberate, and more permanent form of connection. It's a testament to the power of simplicity and universality, a reminder that the most effective messages often transcend the need for complex language. The silent language of stone patterns connects us in an unbroken narrative of innovation, showing that from the earliest traders to modern-day hikers, we share a common desire to say, "I was here," to help those who will follow and to embed our stories into the very world we walk upon. While the Southern Silk Road threads through famous deserts and bustling oasis towns, its northern branches tell a different story, one of vast, open steppes, dense boreal forests, and the nomadic cultures who mastered these expansive landscapes. Here, the communication challenges were unique. Unlike the fixed, sun-baked trails of the Taklamakan, the northern routes were shaped by seasons, animal migrations, and the movements of people themselves. In this fluid world, stone patterning had to be as dynamic and adaptable as the Scythian, Xiongnu, and later Mongol horsemen who traversed it. Their markers weren't just points on a static map. They were part of a living, breathing navigational system that breathed with the rhythm of the land. The patterns themselves reflected this need for clarity across immense, often featureless grasslands. A traveler on the Mongolian steppe might crest a low rise to find a perfect circle of stones, perhaps 20 feet across, laid flat on the ground. This was not a spiritual symbol, but a brilliantly practical one. In a sea of grass where a single misplaced tent could mean missing a crucial meeting, this stone circle precisely delineated a known encampment site, its size indicating it could accommodate a large group. Nearby, a long, straight line of rocks might point toward a shallow river ford, visible only once you were right upon it. These formations were designed to be read from horseback at a canter, providing instantaneous, unambiguous information to riders who covered staggering distances. The true genius of this system was its deep integration with the nomadic calendar and economy. The Northern Silk Road was less a continuous stream of traffic and more a series of seasonal pulses, and the stone patterns acted as a scheduling system. A specific arrangement, perhaps a square within a circle placed at a high vantage point, might signal that the annual horse trading fair at a nearby valley would commence with the next full moon. These markers allowed widely dispersed nomadic groups to coordinate their movements across thousands of square miles without any prior communication. A family herding their sheep to summer pastures could adjust their route based on these stone messages, arriving at a designated meeting point with other clans precisely when the grazing was best and the trading could begin. This demanded a remarkable flexibility from the system itself, a marker that was crucial in the autumn, pointing the way to a sheltered valley for wintering, might become completely irrelevant and even dangerously misleading by the spring once the snowmelt created boggy ground and new paths. Consequently, the northern networks were far more mutable than their southern counterparts. While some large, central cairns at major crossroads were permanent, many of the smaller directional markers were temporary. They were maintained, moved, or taken down entirely by the nomads themselves as conditions changed. This was a communal responsibility, a shared language that everyone was invested in keeping accurate. A trader who discovered a new, safer path through a forest had a duty to build the appropriate stone signs, knowing that others would soon follow. This dynamic, community-run approach highlights the ultimate adaptability of stone patterning. It proves that this was not a rigid, top-down technology imposed on the landscape, but a truly organic form of communication that could be tailored to any human need. On the Northern Silk Road, it became the glue that held a mobile, decentralized society together, enabling not just the trade of goods like furs, amber, and horses, but the vital exchange of information and social connection across the breathtakingly vast and empty spaces of the Eurasian interior. The silent stones that guided ancient traders are now beginning to speak to us through the lens of 21st century technology, revealing secrets that have lain dormant for millennia. The future of understanding these ancient message systems lies not in any single discipline, but in a powerful convergence of fields. Archaeologists are now regularly partnering with experts in satellite imagery, cognitive scientists, and climate historians to form a complete picture. This interdisciplinary approach is crucial because a stone pattern is never just a navigational aid. It's a data point that can tell us about trade volume, environmental conditions, and even the cognitive frameworks of the people who built it. By weaving these threads together, researchers are moving beyond simply identifying patterns to truly understanding the minds and motivations of the cultures that created them, transforming scattered rocks into a coherent narrative of human ingenuity. One of the most exciting frontiers is the application of advanced computational power to problems that were once unsolvable. Imagine an artificial intelligence system trained to analyze thousands of satellite images of a desert or a mountain range. This AI could identify subtle, large-scale patterns of stones that are completely invisible to the human eye, scanning from the ground patterns that might form giant arrows or symbols only discernible from high above. Furthermore, scientists are beginning to use a technique called isotopic analysis on the stones themselves. Every rock has a unique geochemical fingerprint based on where it was formed. By analyzing this fingerprint, researchers can determine if a stone used in a cairn was sourced locally or carried from hundreds of miles away. This simple fact can revolutionize our understanding of trade routes. A cairn built with non-local stones suggests a deliberate, perhaps even ritualistic act of importation, indicating that the site held a significance far beyond a simple trail marker. Perhaps the most profound shift in future research is the growing emphasis on collaborative archaeology, which actively seeks out and prioritizes partnerships with indigenous communities. For too long, academic interpretations were imposed upon these sites without consulting the living descendants of their builders. The future of the field depends on reversing this dynamic. Elders and knowledge holders from First Nations, Aboriginal, and Andean communities possess oral histories and traditional understandings that can provide the missing key to decoding a pattern's true purpose. A formation that a Western archaeologist might label a direction marker could be understood by a local elder as a representation of an ancestral being's journey or a warning about seasonal spirits. This collaboration ensures that research is not only accurate but also ethical, respecting the cultural and spiritual significance of these landscapes and preventing the perpetuation of colonial interpretations. This evolving field also promises to explore the fascinating cognitive foundations of these systems. Why is a spiral so universally understood as a symbol for journey? What makes a zigzag pattern an effective warning across countless cultures? Future research will delve into the realm of neuroaesthetics and pattern recognition, studying how the human brain is hardwired to interpret certain shapes and arrangements. This can help explain the incredible effectiveness of these systems across language barriers, suggesting they tapped into a kind of pre-linguistic universal visual grammar. By understanding the cognitive underpinnings, we don't just learn about ancient navigation, we learn something fundamental about how humans perceive and structure their world through visual cues. Finally, researchers are increasingly looking at these ancient systems as archives of climate and environmental history. The placement of markers pointing to water sources in now arid regions can reveal historical hydrography, showing where rivers once flowed or oases existed before they dried up. Patterns that seem to lead to nowhere might actually point to locations that were once fertile valleys or abundant hunting grounds before climate shifts transformed the landscape. In this way, the stone patterns become a durable record of human adaptation to environmental change, offering valuable long-term data that can inform our own responses to modern climate challenges. They stand as a testament to resilience, showing how our ancestors observed, adapted, and left messages for the future, ensuring that even in a changing world, the path forward would never be completely lost. Now, let us set sail for the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, where the very concept of a road dissolves into the endless horizon, and the art of stone patterning faced its most audacious challenge. Here, among the scattered islands of Polynesia, we find perhaps the most breathtaking adaptation of this ancient language, a system that guided the greatest maritime explorers in human history across thousands of miles of open sea. For the Polynesian voyagers, their world was not defined by corridors of land, but by a watery highway connecting tiny, isolated islands, and their stone patterns became the signposts on this liquid continent, etched not along roads but on the very shores that promised salvation and community. Primary function of these maritime markers was one of immediate and critical necessity, guiding massive, ocean-going double-hulled canoes, or wa, to safe passage through the treacherous coral reefs that encircled their island homes. A mistake in judgment here could mean the catastrophic loss of an entire vessel, its crew, and its precious cargo of families, plants, and animals. To prevent this, navigators relied on specific stone arrays placed onshore. A long, linear arrangement of dark volcanic rocks running parallel to the beach might indicate the one safe channel through the razor-sharp coral, a path that would be invisible from the seaward side. A large, solitary white coral rock placed high on a headland could serve as a daymark, aligning with a specific star on the horizon to mark the bearing for the entrance to a lagoon at night. This was precision navigation where a single misread stone could spell disaster, but the patterns served a far more complex purpose than just landing. They were integral components of a vast mental cartography system. On atolls where every palm tree looked similar, unique stone formations on the beach, a distinctive turtle-shaped array, a series of concentric circles, acted as identifying signatures, allowing a navigator to confirm which specific island he had arrived at after weeks at sea. Furthermore, these patterns encoded vital environmental knowledge. A pattern of stone set in a shallow, tidal pool might be arranged to demonstrate the direction and pull of the strongest currents. Another, using different colored stones, could map the seasonal migration paths of fish schools or the nesting grounds of seabirds, turning the shoreline into a dynamic library of ecological information essential for survival. This system's true brilliance, however, lies in its integration with other non-written communication methods, creating a multi-layered wayfinding technology of unparalleled sophistication. The stone patterns were never used in isolation. They were the physical, tangible anchors for an immense body of knowledge stored in oral chants, songs, and stories. A navigator would have memorized hundreds of these chants, which detailed the star paths, wave patterns, and cloud formations for voyages between islands. The stone pattern on the shore was the physical key that unlocked the correct chant from his memory. Seeing a specific arrangement would trigger the precise oral sequence needed to navigate to the next island, seamlessly connecting the fixed landmark with the celestial information required for the open ocean journey. This holistic approach demonstrates a world view where every element of the environment was a potential source of information. The stones, the stars, the swells, the flights of birds, and the spoken word were all part of a single, interconnected navigational instrument. The Polynesian voyagers did not see themselves as conquering the ocean, but as reading its subtle signs and collaborating with its rhythms. The stone patterns were the permanent, shared nodes in this network of knowledge, the fixed points that allowed for the most daring exploration in human history. They enabled the settlement of the entire Pacific Triangle, from Hawaii to New Zealand to Rapa Nui, a feat of deliberate migration and cultural connection that stands as a permanent testament to the power of human ingenuity and our deep-seated need to communicate, connect, and find our way home, no matter how vast the distance. From the windswept passes of the Andes to the shifting sands of the Taklamakan, the silent language of stone patterning stands as a profound testament to human creativity and our relentless drive to connect. These intricate arrangements were far more than primitive signposts. They were a brilliant, universal dialect that allowed diverse cultures to share knowledge, warn of dangers, and guide each other across the most formidable landscapes on Earth. They enabled the flow of silk and spice, gold and amber, but more importantly, they facilitated the exchange of ideas, beliefs, and technologies, quietly weaving the separate threads of early civilizations into a richer, more interconnected human tapestry. What is perhaps most striking is how these ancient systems wove practical necessity with deep cultural and spiritual meaning. A pile of stones was never just a pile of stones. It was an offering to a mountain god, a memorial to a lost traveler, a communal prayer for safe passage, and a trusted guide all at once. They transformed barren deserts and silent forests into landscapes humming with meaning, where every carefully placed rock whispered a story of those who had come before. This fusion of the mundane and the sacred elevated these pathways from simple trade routes into living chronicles of human experience, endurance, and belief. As we reflect on this forgotten art in our hyper-connected digital age, its lessons resonate with unexpected power. We are surrounded by a constant barrage of complex communication, yet we often struggle with misunderstanding and information overload. The ancient language of stone reminds us of the enduring power of simplicity, intuition, and universality. It shows us that the most effective connection sometimes lies not in more words, but in clearer symbols, not in faster data, but in more meaningful gestures. It challenges us to consider what we are building today that will last as long as those stone cairns, and what messages we are leaving for future generations about who we were and what we valued. Thank you for joining this exploration of how roads once spoke through stones. We hope this journey has offered a new perspective on the silent, sturdy foundations of human connection. If you have any thoughts or know of other fascinating historical mysteries, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this trip into the past, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to join us for our next adventure into the forgotten corners